Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Jack Threlfall Show. This is the interview segment for this week's episode, and we are joined by a very, very special guest, Mr. Russell Howard of RaceStaff.com. Welcome to the show, Russell.
Thank you for having me.
I think the best place to start would be if you could just explain a bit about your role in motorsport and what your job is at the moment.
Okay, so I started RaceStaff about 11 years ago, trying to help get the right people in the right place, the right teams and so on. After working many years in motorsport myself, I was getting a bit tired of constantly getting asked if I knew a data engineer for Le Mans next weekend or whatever it might be. So I thought I should be making a business out of this, you know. So I turned my little black book of contacts into the website, and it's worked really well. And right up to date now, we get, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 jobs listed a month. And on top of that, I do some headhunting. So for very technical roles, the team tends to come to me and say, look, an advert isn't going to work for this role. So can you go and find somebody? So I go off and start ringing around and been pretty successful from mainly in Formula One, to be honest, because they've got such niche. Some of the roles are so niche with that. One of the ones I've got on at the moment, for example, is for a combustion aerodynamicist for Alpine Formula One team and their engine plant, which is near Paris. Great job if you understand what it is and if you understand how the air flows through the engine, through the combustion chamber. It's a really interesting area of the cars. So yeah, that brings me right up to date, and I do go around. I go to probably 20 race meetings a year, including a few F1s, a few endurance. I quite like endurance racing, to be honest. So I make sure I get to Le Mans and things like that. So I need to keep in touch with people, but I also still love it. I still love the atmosphere, and I still love, you know, being at the race meetings. And once you get bitten, that's the trouble. You're kind of stuck.
Absolutely. So is it that element of the motorsport industry? It seems very unique in that the performance of a team is so easily quantifiable. It's so obvious whether a team's winning or losing, but then there are so many factors that actually go into that performance. It can be quite tricky for people to understand what their role is or to understand where they should specialize. So was that the gap that you saw RaceStaff being able to fill?
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember, I'm going back quite a while now when they first had this idea, probably 12 years when I first had the idea. And the only thing that was available then really was Autosport magazine. And you'd put a job ad in there, which of course it comes out every Thursday. So, you know, there was a lag between you putting a job in and it was really expensive. And it just wasn't very efficient. So I thought, this is a pain, you know, we need people now. You know, not like a week on Thursday or whatever. So it was that immediacy that motorsport demands, you know, in every area really, that wasn't being fulfilled. So we were one of probably the first job boards to specialise in anything, and it happened to be obviously my background being motorsport, and it just seemed to fit really well. The job board works really well for motorsport because it's so efficient, it's so quick. You know, sometimes we've found people within the hour. You know, when we list a job, it sends an alert out to everybody that's registered in that category. So we've got about 50 different categories, from the obvious ones, race mechanic, race engineer, to, you know, data engineer, aerodynamicist, and so on. And they get sent an alert when a job comes available for them that might be interesting for them. And it's just a much neater way of doing it than placing an ad in a magazine and hoping that somebody buys the magazine that week. And the jobs are getting more and more complex and more detailed. And now we can include videos and photos and things into them and do a lot more with it. We can pre-screen candidates and so on, which you just can't do for magazine advertising.
And in those first days of the site, that was kind of the selling pitch of the teams. You could go to them and say, look, we will not only find you a candidate faster, but also reduce your cost. And it seems interesting that idea of innovation and efficiency was already applied to so many categories in motorsport inside the business, but to make that observation that it should be applied to recruitment, that's been the key success, the key point, the key selling point for RaceStaff, you think?
Yeah, because it just wasn't easy. You know, I mean, I suffered as well. Once you're into motorsport, it's not too bad because you start building your own contacts up, and then, you know, you speak to other people or other teams that are looking and so on. And I worked trackside for many years, which we'll come on to that. Actually, that's one of the biggest decisions people have got to make, whether they want to be factory based or trackside. And it was hard work. You know, this will simplify the whole process so much, and try and get more people in the right place. And I've had some fantastic comments from guys that we have put in the right place. It can be life changing, whether you're going into Formula One or actually whether you're coming out of it as well. Because most people burn out after 10, 15 years if you're at the sharp end of it, and they have children and so on, and then you can't really be away for more than half the year anymore because your wife's not very happy about it. So it's actually just as interesting people coming out of that game than it is people going in. But yeah, and it just worked. So I kept doing it, to be quite honest with you, and it grew and grew and grew. And then the headhunting. I don't come from recruitment, so I think what the teams like about me is the fact that I kind of know what I'm talking about because I've done quite a lot of different things in motorsport, whereas recruitment agencies tend to be just recruitment agencies for any industry. So. And there's a certain type of person, to be quite honest, that tends to do it a bit like a second-hand car salesman, So I think hopefully I've been a bit of a breath of fresh air, to be brutally honest with them, that if you're looking for a titanium welder and fabricator, you're going to struggle, and tell them the truth about the roles that are available.
And were there times from your experience as a driver where you were able to notice that gap in the market, that their potential for efficiency and the potential for making connections that are mutually beneficial, both for the team to increase their performance, but also to put someone who has that passion for racing, that drive to deliver, to put them in the right role? Were you able to spot some problems at the time that you felt you had a solution to, or were there positive examples too of people you felt, oh wow, that person really is found their job well?
Yeah, it comes down to, for me, it comes down to one word really, and it's passion. And if you're not passionate about motorsport, then you shouldn't be going into it. It's a tough industry. It's long hours. It's hard work, but it's also adrenaline-filled, exciting, amazing, and like nothing else. So you do see opportunities. And through my time through the industry, of course, data is one thing that's grown massively. When I started driving, there wasn't really any data as such from the car. So as a driver, you could get away with saying anything, because nobody could prove whether it was a driver error or whether it was actually a problem with the car. Now you can't get away with anything because everything is logged, isn't it, on the cars? So the growth of the data side of it is quite interesting, and having these guys coming in now analysing all the data and finding performance in that way, which is a relatively new thing. But if I just talk about the passion for a minute, because I was giving a talk at a university, and I said it helps if you guys can think of the area that you're interested in the car. That's quite an important thing. What is it you really want to do? What interests you? And if you've done Formula Student, for example, that might help because you've maybe worked on different areas of the car. Is it the suspension, electronics, the engines, whatever it might be? And I asked this question, and one guy put his hand up and he says, dampers. So I bloody love dampers. I was like, wow, that's really specific area of the car. And he went on to tell me that he built his own damper dyno rig, and he's forever taking apart. He does his own valving on the dampers and so on. And I was like, you need to meet my mate who's head of one of the biggest damper companies in the world. So I put him in touch with guys in Sweden, and I said, this guy's as passionate about dampers as you are. Oh, it's impossible. Nobody's as passionate as me. And I said, he bloody is. So they got in touch, and cut long story short, he's working for them. And that was a relatively easy slot for me. The worst thing for me is when people with lots of passion come up and say, I'll do anything. And that makes it actually quite difficult, because it's like, right, well, okay, so where do I put you in then? Where do I suggest you go? It's quite difficult, that. So it always helps if you've got obviously a ton of enthusiasm, but also a passion for a certain aspect of the car. And
is there any way you would recommend, people going out and being able to search for that bit on the car? For some people, like the dampener guy, it might just seem obvious to him, but maybe when someone's watching racing, if there's any bit that stands out in their memory of, I thought tire strategy was really interesting there, or fuel maintenance.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you think it just comes naturally in people, the way they engage with motorsport as a fan, the bits that stand out to them might be where their path lies?
Well, I think what you tend to find is that people who are massive fans and watch it on TV, of course, they only see the trackside part of motorsport. So it's particularly watching Formula One with the really quick pit stops and all that kind of thing. They want to be part of the pit crew, maybe, which obviously is an option, but there's so much more going on behind the scenes, and not only in the pit garage with all the data and so on, and like you say, the strategists who are absolutely brilliant, but back at the factory, the factories are buzzing, and the big teams certainly have there'd be 600-700 people there, so it's quite a big operation, and most of them have got their own wind tunnel now, and they develop the cars there. So I think that's the first decision. Do you want to be at the factory side of life? So maybe you're helping develop the car, you're designing components for the car, you're working in the wind tunnel, you're doing all these things, or you're working on a composite design, or do you want to be traveling with the team and working trackside? And there's ups and downs with it. You know, for me, it was always the exciting part was working at a track, and that's what I loved and still do. But the travelling's a killer, you know, and it seems exciting at first, but once you've seen that many bloody airports, you soon get tired of it. But I've said that when you're in your 20s and 30s, life's exciting, isn't it? And you don't mind the travelling and so on, you put up with it. But then typically you might want to move to a factory role once you've got a family and all those sort of pressures kick in. And sure, by watching the TV, you can gain a lot of knowledge now, in depth, and like it never used to be. You know, with like Ted Kravitz and what have you, going into details of the car. It is very interesting, and you might spot something in there that they really like. And you know, the typical people that end up in the pit lane have probably started off fixing their push bikes or their motorbikes or their own cars and so on, and they enjoy mechanics. Basically, they get it and they kind of enjoy it, and then that leads you into into motorsport in one way or another. And which leads me on to the biggest problem that all graduates have got, is getting experience, because motorsport's bad for this, but I think every industry to a degree is. But you know, they always want experience, and it's like, how do you get experience if nobody will give me the chance to get experience? So
absolutely,
you've really got to fight for it, and I think it is a case of who dares wins. You know, and I would recommend going to some race meetings at the circuit that's nearest to you, and walking down the paddock and knock on some doors and ask if you can volunteer and just get your hands dirty at weekends and learn whatever aspect it might be. And if it's data you're interested in, try and get copies of the software so you can help understand it and analyze it. And you know, you're probably best doing it on maybe the Friday, not maybe race day, because obviously the team's under pressure and they won't have any time for you. But if you could get down there on a test day or on a Friday or something, everything's a bit more laid back on a test day. And they'd listen to you then, and somebody will give you a chance. You might have to knock on 20 doors or keep asking people, but somebody will. And I was at a friend of mine who runs a prototype Le Mans team, and I think we were in Italy, and I said to him, how many times has somebody knocked on your door and asked if they can come and volunteer? And he said, oh, in the last 10 years. I said, yeah. He said, never. I was like, oh, right, okay. So, you know, there are opportunities like that to be done. You know, and I know it's not easy, and being British doesn't help, because we're all kind of quite, you know, reserved and so on. I mean, sometimes you just got to go for it and ask the question and try and get that initial experience, and then that'll help you find, hopefully, the area of motorsport that interests you most. And it might not be anything to do with the car. It might be media. It might be, you know, you see all these photographers up and down, all the media people now. It's massive, obviously, because there's all the sponsorship involved in it. So maybe it's that side of life that interests you. It's not the engineering side, or as we said, maybe it's factory based. It's trying to find that. It's not easy when you haven't had all the different experiences, but if you can help find that, and then you can find somebody, for example, on LinkedIn that's already doing the job you'd love, and you can ask them, and most people are really good. You know, I deal with very few idiots in the motorsport world, if I'm honest. Some engineers are very difficult to work with, but you know, they're not stupid, and they generally would try and help the next generation with some advice and some contacts and so on. Especially if you're doing something like a dissertation in a specific area. You know, get older guys and ask them, would they give me some input to it? And you're almost getting in through the side door then, instead of just writing to reception to see if they've got any internships, and you're just on this massive pile with a load of other people, you know.
And have you noticed patterns in how teams have changed within the last 10 years? If you've been looking at the kinds of jobs that are posted on race staff, is there an increase in marketing and social media and that side of IT specialization? Or is it, you know, that just an overall growth in every category?
I think there is an overall growth, to be honest with you. Motorsport's grown massively since I started, but yes, there's definitely growth on the media side. Social media obviously didn't exist, those sort of jobs, when I started out, so you've got all that kind of stuff. You've got and interestingly, although that media side and like you said, the software side and the data side has increased without a doubt, what's decreased in terms of being able to find candidates are the real hands-on jobs. So, you know, like for example, titanium welders and fabricators, you can't get them for hen's teeth. You know, one of my mates and customers builds the F1 exhaust systems, and can he find anybody to weld titanium? It's an absolute nightmare. And I've been telling him for years he needs his own apprenticeship scheme, and he's like, I haven't got time to, without flat out, we can't teach anybody how to do it, you know. But they're so hard to come by. There's certain roles that you're doing quite a lot of money right now. If you could weld titanium and fabricate it, if you can build wiring harnesses, there's jobs. I just can't fill jobs for wiring harness builders, believe it or not. It's not rocket science, but you need to understand all the different mil spec connectors and so on. There's guys in America that have been on to me in the last 6 months saying, I need half a dozen wiring and harness builders and I'll pay them 90 grand each. And it's like, there's some really nice roles out there, but if you just happen to fall in that niche, and I'm not saying it's something you should necessarily train up to do if you're not interested in it, but by the look of the draw, some people are doing that and thinking, hang on a minute, all of a sudden I'm really valuable, because of all the electronics on cars now. It's massive, isn't it? The amount of sensors that are on the cars is incredible.
Absolutely. So when you first started Race Staff, did you have that entrepreneurial mindset of the potential for growth was extremely high, that the gap in the market was there that you saw? Did you know that it could kind of grow to the point that it's at today, where it is the biggest motorsport job board in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, because there wasn't really a lot of competition, and competition over the years has come and gone, to be honest, because it's quite hard to get this going. It's really difficult to get the traction going. And there's what we have one larger competitor that's owned by the group of the Motorsport Network, whatever they're called, and they've been trying to buy me every year, rings me up and I don't see myself working for a big organisation like that because of the feedback I get from my customers that have worked with them, and they've got no customer service kind of thing. And, that's the opposite end of the spectrum to what I want to be. These guys, most of my customers have also become my friends, and I know exactly what they want before they tell me usually, because I can understand the type of business they are and the sort of people they're going to need. And I think I'm unemployable anyway now at my age. I don't think, because you've got to turn up on time and things like that, which doesn't really sit all that well with me now. So yeah, I didn't. Honestly, I didn't think we'd get the diversity of roles that we've had. That's been quite interesting. When we've had jobs on with UbiMet that do the weather forecasting for Formula One. We've had that was a software job. All kinds of jobs that are off to the side that aren't even in the core of motorsport that I never knew existed, even, really, to be quite honest. So it's been really interesting and quite eye-opening.
And who were your sort of personal inspirations when you looked to motorsport, figures that stood out as a strong leader or someone who you hope to emulate in your impact in the industry? Do any of those stand out? Any names?
Not really, because I don't think there's anybody doing anything like this. So, obviously I had massive respect for all the guys that were running the teams back then, like Frank Williams and so on. They were just fantastic guys that went out on a limb to do what they did. And to start these teams and run the teams, and not just in Formula One, but in all different areas of motorsport. There's so many people I've come across, I suppose, along the way, but it's such a different thing, running a team or whatever. It's very different, and I've had a taste of that. I've done loads of different jobs, and I've worked with setting up teams, and I've worked with managing teams and so on. Right up until recently, actually, I had a bit of a side gig with a Le Mans setup, and it's just such a different thing, and it's different kind of pressures. Obviously there's massive financial pressures. These cars are so expensive now. For me, it's kind of eye-watering. Me starting in Formula Ford and me, managing to buy a Formula Ford with not a great job at the time. And then realised I was going to need a lot more money to run this thing. So I started a little engineering business, making small components, got a few good contracts, and thought, hey, I can do this. So I raced in Formula Ford 1600s and 2000 Formula 3, tested Formula 3000, which is the equivalent of like GP2 now. But I ran out of talent and money at about the same time. So, but it was a good run. And I think actually having driven the cars, you have a really good understanding of them. So when you're on the other side of it, when you're talking to the driver and they're trying to set the car up, you really get a feel for what they're saying, how the car's handling. When they're saying you're getting high-speed oversteer, and you instantly feel that, and a bit of a shudder goes down your spine when you're thinking about going down a corner at 140 mile an hour, the back end stepping out. So you can really relate to them. So because somebody said to me once, he used to drive this guy, that doesn't mean anything to me as a race engineer. I said, well, it bloody should do, because he's got such an understanding of how that driver's trying to explain the feeling of the car to him. It really is seat of the pants stuff. And I know you can learn it, to interpret what the driver's saying, but I think there's nothing better than actually feeling it. To be honest, even karting, you know how the car's feeling, just like the cars.
So for any engineers listening or any people looking to work in a team, would that be something you recommend? Is even if it is just low-level rental karting, we're very lucky in the UK that there are so many race tracks, whether they're indoor, outdoor, privately owned, whatever. That ability to hop in a car and understand the sensation of going around a corner quickly and pushing the tires to the limit, that sort of feeling, You think
Yeah,
that really benefits someone's role in the team?
I really do. I mean, particularly in single seaters, if that's what interests you, because they're so finely balanced, you know, and they're so adjustable. There's so many things you can adjust on. It's almost unlimited. The suspension adjustments and so on for the handling of the cars. And I just think that, and you're right, we're absolutely spoiled. I don't think we've got the highest density of racetracks of anywhere in the world. And you know, even if you're doing sort of track days where you can go and pay to have a go in a single seater around, you know, I wouldn't particularly. Silverstone's a bit boring, if I'm honest. I prefer Brands Hatch is really good, Donington, those sort of tracks in small single seaters are brilliant fun. Just to have a try, so that you just get more of a grasp of. The cars will be set up really neutrally anyway for if it's a track day thing, so you won't be getting massive understeer or oversteer or anything. But yeah, I do. I think it really helps, and karting, anything you can do, any experience you can get, has got to be a positive when you're going up against other people that haven't got that experience. But particularly if it's in the area you're interested in. You know, if you're interested in composites, then no, driving the car doesn't really matter. If you're interested in composite design or one of the other areas of the car, you know, you walk around the factories and it's mind blowing. The different departments have got. You've got the whole CNC engineering department. You've got the composites. You've got the wind tunnels. You've got a massive design office full of people just to design the components, and it's mind blowing, but pretty bloody awesome actually. And you think, I can't believe F1 never used to be like that back in the day. You know, I don't know, you'd have 20 people designing a bloody car. You know, now it's like this factory full of people. And the level of degree they're going, but it comes with a level of warning as well, because they're so complex the cars now, and the guys have such detailed jobs. You know, one guy came to me a couple of years ago and said, right, my time's up in Formula One, I need out, my family and all the rest of it. I said, okay, what have you been doing? So, well, I'll do the front brakes. I've done it for 10 years, front brakes. Like, right, that's going to be pretty difficult there's no other race series where one guy would just look after front brakes, you know, so you're kind of stuck with going to another team unless you're prepared for a complete change and even a bit of retraining, which is what he sort of did in the end, because, I mean, he's a great mechanic, obviously very talented, but such a specialist in a very small area, which is what happens in F1.
And are there any key like points of growth for the company that stand out to you, like a moment where you realized, you know, your sort of first 1,000 users on the website, or a first big posting from a Formula One team, those kind of moments in the history of race stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I think when we hit 10,000 registered candidates, that was a big moment, because I didn't know how big it would be in terms of actual candidates. I think we're up to about 35,000 now. When we processed 50,000 job applications, then that was quite a moment. And as you say, when you get the Formula One teams ringing you up after hassling them for years, and the different teams and the bigger teams, and then they start ringing you up and asking you to either list some vacancies for them, or even better, headhunt for some roles that are commercially sensitive, so they don't want to appear even on a job board, because then the other teams will get an idea of the area of the car that they're working on. So yeah, there's quite a few moments along the way that I opened a beer that night and thought, oh, that was a pretty good idea all those years ago. And it's, as I say, it's just a pleasure, and it is a pleasure to help the next generation through. And I know it's difficult, and all the guys, if you're wanting to get into motorsport and they're currently doing engineering or formula students or something, you just got to stick at it. You got to keep it, get in there, stick at it, keep bringing people up, keep trying to make contacts on LinkedIn, and get some hands-on experience. And then once you realise the area of the car that interests you, or the area of motorsport, I should say, that interests you, then get stuck in and find people that are doing that role and ask them for help, ask them for more details about what they do and how they got there. And you make a bit of a pain for yourself, because nobody's going to do it for you. You know, you've got. I haven't got the time to help 3,000 students a year find a job or something, but I can give general advice out. And I think, when you go for your job, the problem I have a bit of an issue with universities, because they kind of oversell the dream a little bit, and I think it's their business model that they need bums on seats and they need their X £1,000 a year off the students. And they're kind of over-promising, and a lot of students come out at the end of it and think, right, here we go, straight into a big team in my dream job, and it rarely happens like that. You really need to try and get some experience whilst you're doing your course, and whilst instead of going to parties every night, just leave it a couple of nights and try and get away and get some hands-on experience at weekends with some teams, whether it's at a track or whether it's at their workshop. You will make contacts once you've made some. It always feels, people said to me, it feels like a bit of a gentleman's club when you're trying to get into motorsport from the outside.
Sure.
And in a way, I suppose it's becoming much more of a ladies' club as well now. I'm pleased to say, which is absolutely right. But once you're in, you're in. And one thing leads to another. It really does. And I'm sure other industries are similar. I'm sure being a lawyer is a bit like that, or being an accountant or whatever else. But motorsport is a tough one to break into. But just be resilient and be brave, because once it does open up, it's absolutely awesome. And I don't think there can be many jobs that feel like when you win a race weekend and you're part of that team. There can't be many other jobs that give you that feeling, I don't think. So
Absolutely.
hang in there, because it's worth it.
And would you say that point of access to the industry, would you say that's the kind of biggest misconception that you come into contact with? People saying, oh, I just feel like I can't get my foot in the door, when actually, it's interesting. We spoke to a couple of weeks ago on the show, a photographer, Jamie Price, and he noted that on photography, he sees a similar theme in that there are events around you, there are racetracks around you. You can just go and get experience. Taking pictures there might be especially an easy start, because you can just go as a fan. You don't have to ask anyone. But that same level of access, applying that for engineers, it is maybe the top level roles are going to be harder than you think to get. But on that grassroots level, it is possible. And I think that stood out to me as a really important message. And I think, for people listening, students in similar positions, that idea that you really can go out and capture it, and you're kind of more powerful than you think you are, almost, when you're looking to develop yourself. There'll be opportunities that you don't know what you don't know, I suppose. Like, you don't know what opportunities you're missing out on until you go out there and look for them. Are there some other misconceptions beside that you see, or is that the main one?
I think the main frustration for me is the lack of a decent system to help the students through. Because I get it in the neck quite a bit, saying I can't get experience and so on. Well, it's not really my role. I'd say it's more down to the educators that are preparing people for this marketplace. And I do keep meaning to, now that I've spoken to you, I'm going to have another go at this, because I think it'd be really good to get universities tied in with teams, even in a local area or not, to, when I say sponsor, I don't mean necessarily financially, but sponsor some of the students along through their studies, right? So if you can make a link with, where are you, Lancaster? There's not a lot up here, is there? But you've got M Sport, not too far away. So imagine if you could have links with M Sport, so that your students that are interested in motorsport or doing Formula Show or whatever can do factory tours, and and even to the point where they could interview some of the students or even first years if they're doing engineering or something relevant, and try and keep in touch with them over the period of the studies. And I just feel like we need stronger links between the educators and the industry, because I'm worried that the educators don't always educate for how the industry is right now. They tend to educate for how it was 10 years ago, and things move so fast in motorsport. They need to keep up. So now that you reminded me, I'm going to get back on some universities and see if we can't try and get something together to make life a little bit easier for students to break into the industry, and for the employers to fine tune the next generation that they want. So there's no point teaching them about that, because that's we don't use it anymore. You need to be teaching them about this, and it could be software, it could be lots of different things, lots of different processes that come out now that just weren't invented a few years ago. So it's keeping up to date with them. But this link between the two, I think needs some work on it, and I will try. It's probably not necessarily my job. I think I'm going to have a go at Motorsport UK as well. They should probably be involved in this, and see if we can't build bridges, so that not just waiting until they've graduated, you know what I mean? So that whilst you're studying, you've got some sort of links with teams to make it a little bit easier to access that. And even if it means coming in at the weekends and brushing the floor for a bit, but just being involved and soaking it up and seeing what goes on, because that'll lead you to find your passion with an area of motorsport that you can dive into. And then once you've found that, honestly, life's so much easier when you've got a target to aim for, then, haven't you? Whatever it is, whether it's dampers or social media, if you've got that target to aim for, it makes life a lot easier.
Absolutely. And then, especially with the way we're seeing Formula One grow and change, the teams expanding, I think it goes back to that thing about access to the industry. The opportunities are increasing. It may be at the same time the level of applicants are increasing. I'm sure you may have seen recently, even maybe over the last 5 years, the drive to get into something like Formula One just with its overall increase in popularity and viewership around the world, it must be associated with some sort of increase in applicants on the first level side. Do you think that how do I phrase the question, that that's the biggest like mistake people make, is that we spoke a little bit earlier about the grassroots access. If teams were able to like sponsor, like I think it would just be like a scholarship, right? Like a team would say, we have this role at the end. It would also kind of help their branding within the university, because they could say, wow, look at this team. They're helping out the university, and you can go watch them in Rally Monte Carlo if it's M Sport, or all these different events. That partnership could be really, really valuable, and also could extend beyond the UK in countries where access, it could be an even bigger problem. People don't have those local racetracks.
Sure. That
scholarship program, could be really powerful, because it is something that other industries do. Like lawyers, I have friends that are doing law degrees. They get approached by, or maybe it is investment banking firms, and they'll say, finish your degree, get this grade, you have that guaranteed job. There's no structure for that in motorsport at the moment. Is that the idea?
Yeah, just to try and smooth the passageway and make sure that both parties get what they want. So it's not totally weighted towards the student. We're just trying to help them out in their studies, but it's also a benefit for the team or the company to say, well, actually, we're really short on wiring harness builders. Would any be interested? Have you got any electronic students that would be interested in doing something like that? And the electronics guys have probably never even thought about it. But if you put it in front of them, I think, oh, right, okay, yeah, that'd be interesting. Well, okay, so M Sport maybe aren't going to give you any money, but what they'll do is more than that. They'll give you a helping hand. They'll give you can go up and shadow people that are already building them and see what it's all about, for it, just as an example. And I think it's invaluable, that it's contacting the industry that you need, that you're about to go into, and it's almost too late once you graduated. Because I remember going to I think it was at Cranfield, they do a masters in motorsport, which is quite well thought of, and at the end of the year, of course, they do a presentation about the project they've been working on. I always get invited down. There's some F1 teams there and so on. And I was talking to one guy from Mercedes, and he said, we started coming at the start of the year now to poach the best candidates, because they've often gone by the end of the year. I think, bloody hell, they're fighting over these guys, because it's quite a hard course to get on with, so they take the best of the best, kind of thing. And you just think, well, okay, so if that's working for that master's course, why couldn't it work for degree courses as well? And if your guys go up to M Sport and they have a chat with each of you, for example, that are interested in that, and say, what area are you interested in? Somebody happens to say whatever it might be that they're looking for. Oh, right, well, we need to stay in touch with you then, because we could have something for you at the end of your studies if you're going that route. And there's nothing particularly formal about it necessarily. It's just a holding hand along the way, because I feel so sorry for these guys who've spent all this money with the university, and they've come out and they've got a decent degree. They might have a 2-1 or a first degree in either mechanical engineering, motorsport engineering, or whatever it might be. And yet the universities haven't got any contact with industry, or very little, and don't put any effort in to making the most of that. Some do, don't get me wrong. There are some that are pretty good, but the majority, for me, don't do that. And I'd like to hold them to account, to be honest, because they're the ones that make all the bloody money out of it.
And it's all about, I think, I wanted to touch on protecting the idea of a meritocracy, because I'm sure you will have seen, as a junior Formula driver, it extends to even junior Formula nowadays. They can lose a bit of that meritocracy, and it can become having a big budget. You spoke about not having the budget to continue in your racing career. On that employment side, for jobs in motorsport that aren't driving, feels like that idea of a meritocracy is protected a bit better, because there's an element of access to education, that being a problem, but more so opening up that job market in the way that you have done with race staff is about allowing those best candidates to rise to the top. Did you see that pattern at all as a junior driver, and want to bring that idea of meritocracy forward and allow it to be the best it could be?
Yeah, absolutely, and again, it depends on the role within the team. Because for me, I mean, it's changed a little bit now, but there was always 2 different routes that you take, really. So if you were really just interested in being a race mechanic, which I did start off as that, and I loved it, to be quite honest, you don't need a degree or a high level of education really to do that. What you need is hands-on experience. If you want to be a data engineer or a design engineer, obviously you need a really good level of formal education for that, and that's quite specific for that role. And those are the guys, obviously, that finding it hard because they've studied for all these years and they're probably really good at what they do, but they just can't break into the industry. So there's that side of it. The other guys don't tend to have that problem, if I'm honest. The guys that are coming up through the rankings are being the guys that are doing the pit stops or what have you, they naturally just work their way up. And it's interesting because they tend to go up through the formulas like the drivers did. So, I'd have a mechanic helping me out in my Formula Ford, and he'd come with me to my 2000 and to my F3.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Because you got that relationship with him. So, without realising it, you were bringing them up through the formula as well as yourself. And I think that still happens to a degree, because I think that for the race mechanics, will start on Formula Ford or something, and then think, well, I'd like something a bit more than this, so I'd like to get into GP2 or whatever. And once you're in GP3, GP2, then F1's only a step away in terms of the mechanics and so on. And having said that, quite a few of the mechanics do now have degrees because the car's getting that flipping complicated, I think. But there's still a lot working their way up through the system, and it's interesting how they're then combined, because you have this, you have the mechanics now talking to the engineers, and that dynamic interests me. When I watch it in the pit garage and you see how everyone gets on, and everyone has to get on. There's no doubt about it when you're when you're part of a team. But that dynamic's really interesting, and it's the passionate guys and the good guys that always make it. And and having a positive attitude is absolute prerequisite. I think it is to life in general, but I think it really is in motorsport. And you see the guys come in that are really on it, and they've got a fire in the belly for it, and they enthuse everybody around them. My wife divides everybody up between radiators and drains, and I think she's probably right. Some people just drain all the fun out of a room as soon as they walk in, and other people exude warmth, and that's what you be the radiator, because people will then come to you and respect what you're doing and want to have you around, and before you know it, you'll be top of the game. And you've put the work in, you've got your education, you just getting your experience, working hard, being that positive guy with lots of enthusiasm for what you're doing, and inspiring those around you, because it's pretty tough. I'm saying that, and 10:30 at night when you've been working for 15 hours on this damn car that you can't quite fix, it takes quite a strong character to still be really positive about that and keep going and get it fixed. But if you're all in it together, the team spirit is fantastic, and I've certainly never experienced anything in the other industries I've seen. They've got that team spirit. I remember lying underneath I think it was a Formula 3000 car that I was working on when I was a mechanic, and there's this wealthy the guy had sent his son over to drive in the UK, scenario with lots of money and everything, and the car, he kept crashing the bloody car, and we were sick of this. And in the middle of the night, and we're putting another gearbox in it, and I'm underneath, and I think, damn it, I need an 11 milli spanner for this bolt. And as I put my hand up, thinking I'm going to have to get out again from under the car, all of a sudden, an 11 milli spanner appeared in my hand. Because the guy working with me knew exactly what I was about to do and exactly what I was having to take off. And there's such a fantastic team spirit with the race teams. And I'd advocate working anywhere in motorsport, but if you can at least have a session in the pit lane so you understand the pressures they're under. So even if you're designing things at a factory, they're going to get sent to the pit lane. It'd be really good to have that understanding of the pressures that they're under at the pit lane, and when the way things fit together in particular, that's always used to frustrate me. But anyway,
absolutely. So it stands out to me that motorsport is one of those industries where there is going to be that tangible result. The car has to go on a racetrack. You're going to measure whether it's going quickly, whether it's reliable, whether the driver's feeling confident in it, and at the end of the day, those successes are going to be properly measurable.
Mm-hmm.
There will probably be, people in other industries that might find it harder to perceive that performance, or that they feel that they can't measure their own performance or their role in the job so easily. Do you think that that's a unique aspect of motorsport, that ability to see results every weekend, that draws people to motorsport as an industry, you think?
Yeah, because it all happens so fast, doesn't it? Because if your car isn't ready, they're not going to delay the race for you. You're either in it or you're not. And I think that kind of time pressure, and obviously there's quite a lot of financial pressure behind it when you're working with the big teams, that it's got to be done. And then you see the performance almost immediately. I was talking to a guy somewhere at an airport, I think it was, and he was an engineer for Airbus, designing components for the aircraft. And he said, "Oh, I envy you guys." He said, "I design components for this Airbus, and I won't see it on the plane for 10 years. You guys, you'll sit on it next weekend." I said, "Well, yeah, that's absolutely right. When you see all the 3D printers they've got now, and even composite 3D printers, maybe I shouldn't say that, but there are in some of the teams. The results are so immediate, and you know whether you've made a good move or a bad move when you change a detail on the car. It's so immediate, and so I think it does attract people that like that sort of pace. It's a fast-paced environment without a doubt, and you've got to like that sort of environment, and you've got to relish the pressure that you're under, because that's what gives you the results. And if you're not that way inclined, then certainly don't work in the pit lane. And maybe motorsport isn't for you, because it is time pressure, it's everything pressured. But the end result is amazing.
Do you think at times that pressure can go too far? It feels to me like a manager could almost weaponize that pressure, and there's a sort of a point at which it could become too much and really take a toll on the mental health and the spirit of the team. In that it's a very fine balance with managing that environment of pressure, but also unique to motorsport at the same time, where the rewards of that work come so quickly.
Absolutely, and if somebody's weaponising that, then they shouldn't be in that job. I think they won't be there for long, because I think that's not how you run a race team. You've got to be part of the team, and you've got to accept the pressure and get on with it, and then have a big blowout at night, and laugh so hard that you've got a beer coming out your nose, that kind of thing. But that's after the event, and I think during the event, I can always tell a difference in it when I'm in the pit lane. When the car goes live, the atmosphere changes. It's absolutely, everyone's on their A game now, because everything's about to go live, and it all gets very serious. And some teams are better to work for than others. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Some of them are how can I put it without sounding too? But some of them are very strict and not a lot of fun environments, should we say? Whereas others are a little bit more laid back. All of the same pressures, the same financial pressures, exponential pressures, but it's more of a fun place to be. And they're the ones that tend to attract, for me, the best talent, and the guys who want that sort of environment that is actually enjoyable, because we're only here once, aren't we? You might as well enjoy your job, and some guys enjoy it so much. I mean, I bumped into a guy about 3 years ago now, and at one of the races, I haven't seen him for about 20 odd years. Been in Formula One for 30 years, he told me. I said, "You've been working trackside in F1 for 30 years?" He said, "Yeah, man and boy."
Amazing, yeah. Wow.
I said, "I bloody love it. I can't get enough of it." And he's getting on a bit now. He's like my age, I said, "Are you still doing it?" He said, "Yeah, still doing it." I said, "Hang on, he's still married?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm still married. It's my third wife, but I'm still married." That kind of sums up motorsport for me.
Fair enough. I think in terms of headhunting, when you get a task of trying to find someone for that specialized role, are you trying to match their sort of psychology and the way they work with the culture of a team, or is it purely just kind of, that person should be able to adapt to whatever team they're going to? Does that come into mind at all, or is it really just about finding the best practical performer?
It does come to mind. You've got to bear in mind what sort of character they are, and where they're going. So there's an element of that, but quite often it's so hard to find anybody that's got the skill set that's been asked for, that you'd almost take anybody that's got the skill set and let them work out whether they're going to be a fit personality-wise in the team. A lot of these guys have worked for quite a few different teams, and they understand that they've got to fit in, or they're not going to last very long. So I think that the personality side is less of a stress these days, because they've been around, and the sort of levels of experience that I'm usually looking for aren't a year or two. They're 5 to 10 years doing a very specific role. So there's a good chance that it worked in various places. Sometimes it won't work, of course. There'll be a clash of personality with somebody else, and there's not a lot you can do about that. What somebody's going to have to go, probably, but it usually works out. I've had great successes, very few failures. I can't think of a failure actually through personality. If you've got, and a lot of time I don't even have to explain what the job is. If you're looking for example, a race engineer for LMP1, then the guy knows what is expected of him, because he's done it before. So it's kind of doing the same as that, but with a different team, on a different car. But when you say you're either a number one mechanic, you're a race engineer, you're a data engineer, once you've got 5 years plus experience, you know exactly what that role is. I don't need to ask them if they know about MATLAB software or whatever else, because obviously it goes with the trade. It's like asking a joiner if he's brought his saw with him. It's obvious that you know all these things to go with it. And it's quite often for me, it's the timing is the hardest thing actually. It's finding the right guy at the right time of his career really, or his life, as in, what's your position with the children? And he might say, well, I've got kids now, so I want to be working factory based rather than trackside. This comes up all the time. Or can you move? Can you relocate? Brexit's been a nightmare in terms of relocations. That's made things a whole lot more complicated. Trump not being president anymore has made it a lot easier to get to America now, so that's good. So I've got a big team over there. Can't say who it is yet, but they're coming back to me, I think, next week. Quite a big team, looking for quite a few staff quite quickly. And they're saying, look, we need guys from Europe because they've got experience in these sort of cars that we haven't got in America. So we can get visas for them because you've got special experience that we haven't got there. And there'll be some good opportunities coming up there for people who want to move to America. I've got some coming up in Australia in the supercars. Looking for
brilliant series of supercars. Really, I mean, I love it. I love supercars. The action there and the storylines. It's such its own special culture there. Supercars. It's really cool.
It's brilliant, and they're really struggling down there for decent sort of race engineer type guys. He said there just isn't any, so we're going to have to bring them over from Europe. And I'm saying, well, actually, I'm sure there's quite a few guys in the UK that won't mind a few years in Oz to come and work on those cars. So I don't see that being a massive problem. We've had quite good success in the past with people going to Australia and America, because it's the sort of thing you might want to do for a few years. Why not? It's all good experience, isn't it? Really? A different culture and so on.
Do you think that at times teams can be guilty of maybe taking advantage of people's passion for the sport to get away with those long hours, or is that just an inescapable part of the role?
I think some teams do. I have to give them a dose of reality when they're asking for all these qualifications, all this experience, and they're willing to pay up to 25,000. I'm thinking, forget it. It's not going to happen. You're just not being realistic there, and and it hurts sometimes because you inevitably I end up upsetting people. But I say, well, try it. But honestly, you pay peanuts and so on, and you're not going to get the guy you think you're going to get for that. You're probably going to have to be 40. We can't afford that. Well, you need to rethink what you're doing then, really, because I don't think, so you've got to be careful, but it's a bit like the buyer beware scenario, isn't it? You've just got to watch yourself and make sure you don't get drawn into that and end up working stupid hours and so on for not much cash. I think that's less appropriate for if you've got a decent degree or a master's or something and you're going in at that level. I don't think that happens so much there. I'm thinking of the junior roles that people might take more of an advantage over. It's not like a junior doctor sort of thing, that scenario where they expect you to work 100 hours a week sort of thing for next to nothing for a few years to earn your stripes. I don't think it really happens that. I mean, everybody works quite a lot of hours in motorsport, I suppose, but you also get time off in lieu if you're doing too much and so on. So, but it is that lifestyle. You've got to either like it or you don't, and there's one way to find out.
Absolutely, and a site like yours, it has that feature of allowing people to compare, even if they are currently employed in motorsport. They can see other jobs, and that it gives them that sort of bargaining power to understand, well, hey, look, I'm in this role, I don't particularly want to leave, but another team has these hours or is paying slightly higher here, or is giving someone that different sort of role within the team. So it really allows people to take that take that power or take that evidence of what people are doing at other teams, where in the past the teams probably wouldn't want that information to be public because it stops people from being aware of conditions in other teams. Is that a pattern you see quite a lot of people using other job offers as like negotiating positions instead of simply just taking them?
Yeah, definitely. And I think at the moment in particular, it's a buyer's market. It's a candidate's market. It really is, because we're struggling, to be honest, on most vacancies to get a decent set of candidates applications through. And I honestly blame it on the whole Brexit COVID situation. Has not helped at all. I think with the COVID thing, people are maybe thinking of staying in the current jobs a bit longer, you know, with after all the furlough and all the rest of it. I think the Brexit thing's hurt because there's definitely less Europeans interested in working in the UK. And not only that, there's less chance of them working in the UK because we have to pay a fee now. The smaller teams have to pay a fee for like a visa sort of thing to get them here, which they're not always prepared to do. So that's definitely hurt. So yeah, and you're right. It's if nothing else, race stuff is quite a good indicator of the jobs that are available in the marketplace. And if people are interested in motorsport, I think they should always keep an eye on the website there just to see what's coming up, because you know they might not be qualified for that job right now, but they might think, hey, you know, that's what I'm going to aim for, and that's the experience I want to get, and that's, you know, in a few years' time, that's what I want to be doing. And I suggest they do a screenshot of that job description, pin it on the wall, and you know, try and tick all the boxes of experience that they're asking for. And it's so much easier when you've got something to aim at like that for the future.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think one thing I also wanted to touch on was, with all the experience you have working inside motorsport, do you still feel like a fan, or has it really changed the way that you watch and engage with the sport, that you still have that passion for, that we all still have that passion for? How has your perspective as a fan evolved?
I'm still a massive fan. I watch all different kinds of motorsport. My son is in particular. I don't know where he gets it from, but my son is as well. So we go to quite a lot of race meetings. The only thing I don't like, to be honest, I like to be on the inside if I'm going to a race meeting. I don't really like to just be in the grandstand watching. I kind of want to be involved somehow. So I quite like being in the pit lane, and I'll take a few pictures even if I'm not that involved with the team, just because that's the bit that I like, really. You know, I don't mind going and watching at one of the best corners or something for a while, but the thrill for me is still being involved with the team. So even though I go to a lot of race meetings, I always try to get somehow on the inside, because that's the slightly more exciting part. And I know it's difficult for the general public sometimes to do that, but with smaller race meetings, it's really not. You know, and things like the European Le Mans Series is a great example of that for me. I don't think they charge now for going in the paddock. So the general public can wander. If they do, it was like €10 or something last time I was there. So the general public can wander up and down the paddock, looking at some of the cars on display. They can even go in the back of your pit garage, and they might ask you if they can come take a picture of the car and that kind of thing. And I'm always up for that with the teams I'm with, and you know, taking that many pictures of people with the cars and so on. They ask you about the cars and the costs involved and all the rest of it, because it's quite. Unfortunately, they stopped racing in the UK last year because of Brexit the year before, and I don't know if they're coming back anytime soon, but it's almost cheaper to go and watch him at Spa, or certainly more exciting. You know, to go to Spa or something like that would be a really good road trip to watch an ELMS race. Not expensive to get in, brilliant race, and guaranteed a really good race. Go and look at the LMP2s, which sound amazing. £750,000 for a rolling chassis, and then you have to pay €1,000 an hour to lease the engine. So they're not cheap things to run, but they're really, really good cars, really good racing, and you get a 4-hour race out of it.
Absolutely. And what is it about endurance racing that really captures that spirit? Do you think it is purely just like the most difficult kind of category, like a 24-hour race or a 12-hour race? Yeah. That challenge of applying yourself as a pit team in the crew for that entire period. Yeah. Is it just cooler because it's more difficult, or how do you view that kind of
I just think it's a lot more open. So, you know, Formula One is extremely commercialised, of course, because it kind of has to be for the sort of money that's involved in it. So everything's expensive. I think it's $5,000 to get in the paddock or something stupid. You know, it's just all aimed at the wealthy, really, and that's their brand, isn't it? Which is all well and good. But then you go to what's the stark difference is you go to like a sort of something like an endurance race where you can get to the backs of the pit guys in the paddocks and so on, get much closer. And in fact, I'm sure they have a session on the Saturday, I think, where you can walk them down the pit lane, and the drivers are signing cards and things for you, and all the rest of it. It's so much. It's like going back in time a little bit for me. Everything's much more open, and everybody's much more open. They kind of invite you in the pit guys to look at the cars and things. Imagine that in Formula One. It's just never going to happen. So, unless you're a multimillionaire, of course. So I think it's that aspect that I like about it. And yes, it's tough, you know, staying awake it's not 24 hours, it's more like 48 hours you're almost awake for the race is difficult, you know, it's especially as you get older. But the thrill of it is there. And and it adds that extra dimension of keeping the flaming car running for, even the 4-hour races. It's sometimes quite tough to keep a car running on the absolute limit for 4 hours. Is not so easy, or 6 hours, whatever the races are. 24 is obviously an extreme case for it. But yeah, and I think the friendliness of it all and the atmosphere all sort of builds up for me to be a really cool series, and I think it's quite underrated. People have sort of jumped on the Formula E thing, and I've been to quite a few of their races, and it's okay. I'm a bit old school, if I'm honest. But the likes of ELMS, who are, I think I'm right in saying, they're using e-fuel this year, so they're sort of trying to combat the emissions situation, and they're using, I think I'm right in saying, they're using fuel that's come from the waste of grapevines, and they're somehow turning that into an e-fuel, and that cuts down emissions by about 60-70%. So. They're doing their bit, which is great. I think that's absolutely right. Not everything can go electric. It's not appropriate for every form of racing, of course. I do think F1 on a good target there. They've got the most efficient powertrains that have ever been built by anybody anywhere, and they're heading towards running them on e-fuel. So then the emissions will, in effect, be less than the electric, because you haven't got the emissions of building the battery packs in the first place and so on. So that's interesting development, and everything's heading in that direction one way or the other, isn't it? Whether it's battery or hybrid or e-fuel kind of thing. So yeah, but I'd say if you ever get a chance, get down to an ELMS race.
And there's so many different forms as well from the engineering side, especially with something like the World Endurance Championship. You have 4 different categories of cars all racing on track at the same time, and that style of racing, not only is it extremely different to Grand Prix racing, but it's almost a bit more open, where you will genuinely get some cars, in the Pro-Am GT battling against the Pro GT, or the GT battling against the LMP2, and they're actually having a fight. It's not purely just a blue flag situation. Would you say that's an opportunity to specialise for a young engineer listening to this? There's a gap there in European Le Mans.
Yeah, because I found the whole thing quite interesting, really. And the new generation of, well, they're not called LMP1s now, the LMDH, whatever they are, the height of it.
Prototypes, yeah.
Yeah, the prototypes are really interesting cars they are now, with the hybrid systems in them. And there's much more manufacturers coming into it because it's gone hybrid, after they've recovered from the whole diesel scandal when Audi backed out and all the rest of it. So we've got a lot of the manufacturers coming back into it. And it's a really, really interesting race series right now. The World Endurance, they wouldn't let it lie for long. It's a really good series. So they've managed to, I think anyway, absolutely nail the cars that they're running now, and the series and the specs of them. And the next few years are going to be really interesting. Back to the heyday, hopefully, of endurance racing. And so, yeah, I absolutely think there's an interesting outlet there, whether you like GTs or the prototype side of it, with the whole hybrid situation. And it's exciting racing, and it's just not quite as, it's not as pompous, and it's not as commercial as Formula One, to be honest. And they still have exciting pit stops and lots of them, and so on. So yeah, I'd definitely recommend looking into that. There's quite a few teams. You've got one of the best ones, of course. You've got Toyota Motorsport. They're only in Germany. Fantastic facility there. Absolutely mind-blowing. Really good restaurant. And lots of, you got all the engine manufacturers. You got Orica over here. There's so much going on in Europe for endurance. That's why America are looking to, because the cars are the same now. The IMSA in America, the cars are basically finally got together and decided that the cars can be the same spec, and that's really exciting as well. So you get European guys being really valuable in America, because it's all new to them. Certainly the hybrid side of things, and the even P2s are. It's all kind of new stuff to them.
And we're looking to the future of motorsport, you see, that growth in America, in, I think also the Middle East is a key point where motorsport is really expanding. Are those just the main patterns you see in that, just sort of geographically, other countries apart from the UK investing more in motorsport, or are there other patterns you see looking towards the future in terms of maybe something like automation or different kinds of specialization when you look towards the future of jobs in motorsport? What do you see?
Well, yeah, a bit of all of that, really. I think in terms of specialisation, of course, electronics aren't going away. That's only going to get bigger. So if you're into electronics, I think you're onto a good thing there. because they're just more and more, well, not only just on the sensor side and the data side, but just maybe a little bit more automation. I know they've been trying to get that robo race thing going, haven't they, where they're autonomous cars. That might be a step too far, but it's all good sort of prototyping work, isn't it, and pushing the boundaries and all this kind of stuff. But also, yeah, the countries, I think America's going through an interesting change, because the likes of NASCAR's kind of dying off, really, and India's as well, if I'm honest. I've got an agent over there, and he's saying they're taking 10,000 seats out of the stands at a time because they're empty. Wow. And they're embarrassed that they look so empty at some of these big venues. So, but what's growing there is the whole IMSA thing. That's doing really well, and people are really appreciating that form of racing. And yeah, you got the whole Middle East. That's again, that it's going to grow, and there's plenty of money there to get motorsport going over there. But there's lots of interesting areas, but it's got to interest you, hasn't it? Don't get into electronics just because I said it's a great area in the future. You got to be interested. You got to be passionate about it, and then that'll dictate, I think, where you go, and you'll find your way without a doubt. You'll zigzag your way to your ultimate job, like we all did. Nobody walks in. Well, very rarely you'd walk in the door on the first morning and think, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. You zigzag your way through it, and you'll end up there. But you need to be quite resilient, and don't give up.
Wow, that's really great advice. I think especially for people to learn that, the path is there, whether it's not obvious to you directly how you're going to get there. I'm sure for the drivers, it's not obvious to them when they start. I'm sure in your career as a driver, it probably wasn't running a job networking website your ultimate dream there, but you found your way, and you're kind of really empowering people like me to find their role in the industry and get on that inside of the pit wall as well, be able to change the way they engage with it on that fan side, and to really make it the backbone of their livelihood. I think one final question I wanted to ask, that we ask all our guests, is any kind of category you follow or anything you're a fan of. Mostly it's been Formula One so far, but a bold prediction as we look to 2022 results wise. Who's going to win Le Mans this year? Toyota may be an easy shout for that one, but maybe for the Formula One season, a bold prediction you see with your expertise, what stands out to you as a storyline for racing in 2022?
Okay, I think Haas are going to do quite well this year. I don't think they're going to win. I think they're going to do quite well. From what I've seen of the car, and I speak to the team and so on, and I think, they had a disastrous year last year because they took their eye completely off the ball. They're a small team. They really concentrated on developing this year's car. So I think they're going to do quite well.
It's been high risk, high reward, hopefully, their strategy of really sacrificing at the start of last year, being, we're going to come P10 in the Constructors' Championship in 2021, almost knowing that from the start and openly saying that as well to the media. They've kind of taken that risk of saying, we have invested everything into this year's car. So it would be really brilliant to see that reward come through. And especially you speak about the next generation of racing, Mick Schumacher and his story in Formula One, I absolutely love. And he's a real great figure, and I think a really quick driver. So if he could get a great car from Haas to use, like the old days of Haas, like 2015, 2016, absolutely. They were that new entrant. They were quick, and they were a point scoring team. So there we are, Haas competitive.
I really hope so. But actually, there could be some quite interesting, certainly for the first few races, I think there could be some quite interesting results, couldn't there? Because when you talk about the brand new car, it can throw up some quite interesting anomalies at first, and then the bigger teams tend to work it all out quite quickly, don't they? But I'm hoping for I have a little bet with my son on that. I think we just use one of these betting apps, and we have a fiver to put in and decide where we're going to put it on. And we came out 80 quid up actually last season. I was quite chuffed about that. This season, I don't know. I'm going to be spreading that. I'll probably put a quid on quite a few different ones, I think, because it's anything could happen. And I think it's a really interesting. I'm pleased it's happened. Something needs to happen. Sure. I'm not sure they've nailed the aerodynamics so that the following car isn't in the way quite so much. I think they could have gone a bit more extreme than they have on that front.
Interesting. Okay.
But let's wait and see. Because that's certainly messed up all the overtaking. When back in my day, you look at the wings, there were single plane wings, and we never had any problems overtaking, because we didn't have all the turbulence, the dirty air coming off the back of all these fancy aerodynamics on the cars. So they've cleaned that up a lot, to be fair, whether they've gone far enough. And I think the cars are too big as well. flipping huge now. And
Absolutely, especially street tracks as well. It becomes so obvious that it just doesn't look right to see them driving around Monaco.
No, and the big end plates on the front wings are just going to get knocked off, and you just think, no, I think they need to bring the wing back onto the inside of the tyre width rather than the outside of the tyre width, so it doesn't get knocked as easily. Because you potentially your race is over just from tapping something, But yeah, I don't know. Let's see how it goes. They look a little bit Americanized to me, the cars, which is probably right. But yeah, let's hope for an exciting season again this year. Eh?
Absolutely. My favourite Murray Walker quote is anything can happen, and it often does.
Yeah.
I think absolutely that's 2022 Formula One for you. So we can end the interview there. Thank you very much, Russell, for coming on. This has been a real treat. I think full of great advice for students and anyone looking to get into the motorsport industry. Thank you so much for being on.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.